Hi, everybody. How are you? I am Marianne from ESL Services. I am an ESL language instructor. That means I teach English as a second language. I work at Brock University, and you are joining Drop In with Marianne at Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Now, some of you are already at Brock University, and some of you have been in my classes. So welcome. If you do not know who we are, and we are in St. Catharines, Ontario, welcome to Drop In with Marianne. And the purpose of this show is to help students with their grammar issues. Now, you might have been studying English for a long time. Maybe you're a new English learner. That's okay. We cover anything that you guys want to go over. All you have to do is send me an email at the address provided on the screen, and we will go over anything that you would like to go over in Drop In with Marianne. So today we are going to get started talking about conditionals. Now, somebody wrote in and wanted to know about conditionals. So let me just check. That was Sheila. Sheila wrote in and wanted to know how to use conditionals in sentences. And I'm so glad that she wrote in and asked this question, because we have a lot of different sentences that we use with conditionals. And I'm really glad that you asked that question, because it can get a little bit confusing. And sometimes when we are studying English, it can be a little bit tricky, because in maybe your language, you don't have certain grammatical structures that we have in English, but that's okay. That's what we're going to go over. And so I don't want you to worry about that. The other thing I wanted to say, and I say every time we get together, is practice, practice, practice. You need to practice your English. It's one thing to study a book. It's another to watch the teacher online. But if you are not practicing your speaking, it won't stay in your head, and then it's easy to forget it. So, with that being said, I want to now dive in and start talking about conditionals for Sheila. Now, a conditional is easily recognized because it has the word if. If. That makes it very easily recognizable. A conditional says what will happen if a certain event occurs. If a certain event occurs. Now, you might think, well, that's easy. An if sentence or an if question is easy. And it is easy. But one thing you might not know is that there are 4 different kinds of conditionals. 4. So I want to talk about the first, the second, the third, and you might think that it's called the 4th conditional, but we don't call it that. We call it 0 conditional, and there's a very good reason for that. Now, the first conditional deals with the future tense. It talks about what might happen in the future. Remember, use the future tense. It is a real sentence, not unreal. Now, you might say, well, what does that mean? Real means it's a possibility. It could actually happen. Unreal means it's probably impossible, or it is impossible, and it could never happen. So let's deal with the first kind. It is a real conditional. It happens in the future tense, and we use the present tense. For example, if it snows, we will build a snowman. If it snows, we will build a snowman. Now, I think you guys probably are familiar with that kind of sentence because that is the most common. It's a very real possibility that it could happen, and it probably will happen. You always use the future tense, and if it snows, well, we will build a snowman. That's a good chance it will happen because that's what people do often when it snows. Now, there's another kind of first conditional sentence. How about this one? If I go to Paris, I will have dinner on the Seine. If I go to Paris, I will have dinner on the Seine. Now, this is a very real possibility. It's actually a certainty in my life. If I go to Paris, I will have dinner on the Seine. The Seine is a river that runs through Paris, and it's so beautiful. And you can take a riverboat tour down there. So let's get back to the first conditional. If I go to Paris, I will have dinner on the Seine. Very good possibility. Future tense, very real, and simple present tense. If I go to Paris. Now, let's look at another example. If you eat lunch now, you won't be hungry. Won't is also future, but it's a negative. If you eat lunch now, you won't be hungry. If you eat lunch now, present tense, you won't be hungry. Future, negative. Do you see how that works? So the first conditional, the first kind of conditional, deals with the future tense, and it has the simple present tense in the first part of the sentences that I'm giving you. Now, another example, oh, this is a good one. If you are a miserable person, you won't have any friends. If you are a miserable person, you won't have any friends. Now, the first phrase, if you are a miserable person, that is the simple present. You won't have any friends. Future. If you complain about everything, you will lose friends. If you complain about everything, simple present, you will lose friends. Future tense. Do you see how that works? Very real sentences, very real possibilities. Now, you might say, that's great, but what about if it's not possible? Well, we call that an unreal conditional. An unreal conditional is a conditional sentence that has a very, very unlikely chance of happening. It's pretty much impossible. And we use these to talk about if something happened, but it won't. And a good example of this is if I had $1 million, I could go to Europe. Now, do I have $1 million? No. If I had $1 million, I could go to Europe. If I had $1 million. Now, in this sentence, this is very unreal because I don't have $1 million. I wish I did, but I don't. Secondly, you will also notice that it is an impossible sentence. It's often very hypothetical when you're talking about if something happened. It's a course of action that would follow if this would happen, but it won't. I do not have $1 million. I don't have $1 million. And you will notice, you guys, that with the second conditional, it also uses the future tense. If I had $1 million, I would go to Europe. Now, I would move to Europe. Now, in these sentences, we use the modal would. I would, but it is used with will, correct? So in the first conditional, we use simple present and future. In the second conditional, we use, well, if I had $1 million in my possession, that means, yeah, if I had it now, then I would go to Europe. Well, because it's conditional in this case, we have to use would or were. We use these words in the second conditional because they are impossible situations, probably, or hypothetical, or not very likely to happen. Another example could be, when you say, if I were you, I'm not you. I can't be you. It's impossible. But it makes for a great second conditional. If I were you, I would go to the grocery store right now. If I were you, I would quit smoking now. If I were you, I would start eating healthy. These are conditions that are impossible because I cannot be you. It is possible for you to eat healthy. It is possible for you to stop smoking. It's possible for me to move to Europe, but only if I had $1 million. And if I don't have the $1 million, I'm not moving to Europe. Well, it's the same thing. If I were you, I'm not you. I can't be you. Therefore, it is an impossible conditional. Another one, here's a great sentence. If I had a horse, I would ride him to school. What? If I had a horse, I would ride him to school. Now, I don't have a horse. The chances of me having a horse are slim to none. Therefore, it's an impossible situation. So with the first conditional, they are real. With the second conditional, they are unreal. Both conditionals use the future tense when talking about what they will do or what they would do. Now, that brings us to the third conditional. Now, the third conditional is a little bit different because it uses the past, not the future, like the first and second conditionals. The third conditional does not use future tense. It uses the past tense. Now, it is also impossible. Just like the second, which is hypothetical or an unreal situation, the third example of a conditional sentence is also impossible, but not because it's a situation that could not happen. It's because it's a situation that already happened. It's over. It already occurred, but it won't occur anymore. It's finished. That's why it is a conditional that can never happen. So we've got first conditional with real, second conditional is unreal, and third conditional is also impossible. It is over. It is finished. Now, you might think, well, what's a good example of that? Well, we live with those every day. They're little regrets, maybe. And I'll give you an example. If I had studied more in university, I would have become rich. What? If I had studied more in university, I would have become rich. Now, these are situations that are finished. I'm finished university. I can't study more in university because those days are finished. You might use the same example In your situation, you might say, if I had studied for that test, I would have gotten an A. If I had studied for that test, I would have gotten an A. Why is that impossible? Because the test is over. The test is finished. We can't go back. We can't go back to the test. It's over. Another example, maybe you could think of one. You could have asked her if she returned your text. You could have asked her if she returned your text. You could have asked her if she had returned the books. These are third conditional. They are situations that have already finished. They are over. You cannot go back to these. They are done. And you know what? They won't occur anymore. That is the tricky part. It's over. Now, in the second conditional, it is impossible. It's hypothetical. But in the third, it's already happened. It's finished. And that's why we can't go back and do a do-over. Now, another example, let's think. If we had gotten to the airport on time, we would have caught our flight. If we would have gotten to the airport on time, we would have caught our flight. Again, impossible because the situation is over. You cannot go back and revisit this situation. It is over. Now, that brings us to our fourth and final conditional. Now, oddly enough, the other conditionals are called first, second, and third. Why don't we call it the fourth conditional? Well, we don't. It's called zero. Zero conditional. Why zero? What does that mean? Well, this is easy to remember, you guys, because with this conditional, we deal with facts. These are absolute 100% certainty. 100%. You can say if or when for these conditionals. Now, what does that mean? If you, let's say, if you heat snow, it will melt. If you heat snow, it will melt. That is a fact. That is not something we're making up. That is a fact. Therefore, it's a conditional, but there is zero condition. We don't say, if you do this, this will happen when we are talking about real. Well, with real, you can say, if you do this, this will happen. If a certain event occurs, that's conditional. So for first, second, third, and zero, that means if a certain event occurs, then there will be something happen. That applies to the snow in zero conditional. That is absolute certainty. If you heat snow, it will melt. Now, for zero conditional, you can substitute if for when. When you melt snow, when you heat snow, it melts. When you heat snow, it melts. When you get too close to the fire, you get burned. When you travel too close to the sun, you burn. These are absolute certainties. We can use if or when we are talking about zero conditional. For first conditional, we use if. For second conditional, if. For third conditional, if. For zero conditional, We can use if or when. Well, Sheila, I hope you are satisfied with the 4 conditionals that we were able to study or look at today. Now, remember, you guys, the best way to remember anything you are studying is to practice. Practice your English. Practice on your homestay family. Practice on your friends. Practice while watching TV or movies. Practice while reading a novel. Practice speaking any opportunity that you get. Talk to the TV if you have to. Talk to yourself. Sometimes that's a good thing to do. These are the 4 conditionals. If you have any questions, please send an email to the email link below, and we will go over your grammar question on Drop In with Marianne. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and follow us on Instagram. I would be really, really happy to answer your question. So feel free to send Marianne, that's me, a question at Drop In with Marianne. This has been a great day. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you for joining me on Drop In with Marianne. See you tomorrow. Bye.